This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, it's been quite the weekend. WWE was in Saudi Arabia to crown some kings and queens. I was here in Pittsburgh dining on pork and beans. And Retro Raw gave me coronary artery disease. And I watched NXT Takeover from 10 years ago. It was a fun trip down memory lane, as the cool kids may say. And we are going to discuss it all on today's show in lengthy, great detail. Only not really. I heard AEW had a pay-per-view the other night. I'm sure it was a rousing success, as all AEW pay-per-views are. I've just been having fun listening to Brian Last skewer those shows, continuing to have to suffer through those god-awful TV programs. And they're doing the Lord's work over there on the Jim Cornette platforms. It's more than I can say. I'm just trying to preserve my day-to-day sanity where I can. So it's probably best if I steer away from anything involving the words all and or elite. So welcome to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. Make sure you subscribe and like the show if you have not already. We are here on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for new content. And we've got a plethora of good stuff to talk about today, so may as well just go ahead and dive into it. I'm still currently running on fumes, so I'll try not to seem so lackadaisical in my approach here. Maybe if I splash a bit of water on my face mid-review, I'll be in good shape. But then I might destroy my computer. And this will become the lost episode of the FSWR show. And we can't have that. So here's the real question. How long do I want to spend talking about this King, Queen of the Ring Saudi special? The answer is not a whole lot. And thankfully, I can go ahead and expedite the process because I had the luxury of being able to watch the show after it had already partially aired. So it gave me the ability to skip through the entire pre-show, plus the Becky Lynch-Liv Morgan title match. And I know what you're all thinking. It's because of Liv. You're correct. I am now convinced that WWE is trying to make Liv Morgan their modern-day version of Charlotte Flair. For whatever reason, this company is just weirdly obsessed with this prissy little bimbo. I have no idea what they see in her, nor do I understand what the modern fans see in her. I mean, I guess if you're into OnlyFans plastic-looking models, I can maybe see the appeal. She doesn't do much for me, brother. I'll tell you that. And the mere fact that they actually had Liv beat Becky to win the belt here, I mean, I know it's part of a larger story they're doing on Raw. You know, Rhea had to relinquish the belt because she was cough injured in a backstage brawl with Liv. So the idea here being, well, you know, they put the strap on Liv so Rhea can come back, squash her in like 8 seconds, and then recapture the belt. It makes sense. You know, they probably don't want to beat Becky. Liv is easier to make fodder because she's like 4 feet tall and weighs 80 pounds. It's not enough of a story reason to get me to sit through 20 minutes of watching Becky sell for this scrawny little bimbo. But what's done is done. So begrudgingly, just in order to safeguard and make sure I didn't get fucked with the way Peacock's streaming service works, I decided to watch the three-way with Sami Zayn, Chad Gable, and Bronson Reed. Again, not because I was remotely interested, but I knew if I tried to wait any longer, I knew that Peacock would handcuff me into only being able to watch the show from a certain point in the timeline delay. I made that mistake last time. It was a miserable experience. Now, I would have been much more intrigued to see maybe Zayn and Gable one-on-one, because I've heard those two are actually doing some good business together. I have no idea how Bronson Reed factors into any of this. I kind of forgot that guy existed. But WWE loves their three-ways. God knows we can never get through one fucking premium live special without seeing one of these booked. It's got to be a rib at this point. I mean, if they had to book a big guy to be a part of this three-way, I'd have much rather seen Otis in there. Not only was he standing outside the ring anyway, but Otis is much more fun to watch than boring Bronson. I mean, they're already teasing the split with him and Gable. Seriously, why not just have him be the third guy? Would have at least made for an interesting story throughout the match, instead of just having him stand on the floor like a dope the whole time. I mean, it was a modern three-way match. I don't really know what else to say about these kinds of matches that I already haven't stated over and over and over again. They did a bunch of obviously pre-planned three-way spots. You had the glaring faux pas where two guys are in the ring doing stuff and the other guy's out on the floor just sort of waiting for his cue to hit the ring, either to break up a pinfall attempt or set up another three-way spot. You know, Sammy was the obvious babyface here, the hometown hero, essentially. You know, up until the last minute when they shot the angle with Otis and Gable on the floor, you know, the rest of the match was just kind of window dressing until we got there. They do the deal where Gable foists Otis into taking out Bronson with a lariat. Immediately I start asking the question, why didn't he just do that from the start? Why have him stand outside the ring for 15 minutes and wait to attack the other two participants? The answer is because wrestling is stupid and there's no common sense put into agenting these things. And so you get the drama where Otis doesn't want to hit Sammy because apparently those two have been buddy-buddy on Raw. So they milk the deal where Gable gets in his face. He slaps him and tells him to do as he's told. And the climax is where Otis accidentally takes out Gable with a clothesline after Sammy ducks. Then Sammy gets in the ring, takes advantage to hit Bronson with the haluva kick in the corner, and he gets the 3 count. So now the big stir is over whether or not Otis meant to take out Gable or not. I'm sure they'll blow it off on Raw or something. Beyond that, I got nothing to add. It was a paint-by-numbers WWE three-way that I'll probably forget about 2 weeks from now. And since I don't watch Raw and I don't really have any vested interest over what happens with Alpha Academy, the angle didn't really do much for me. I didn't hate it. At least they're trying to do something serious with Chad Gable for a change, instead of just making him a comedy act with the rest of the Alpha Goons. But I think it's a depreciation factor with him now, where he's been neutered on the main roster for so long. Do you honestly even care at this point what they do with Chad Gable? So what if they break up Alpha Academy? Where does that leave either guy after the fact? Is Otis going to get a main event push out of it? Highly doubt it. Is Gable going to be a top heel? Highly doubt it. At the end of the day, what does it all accomplish? It's just another mid-card story on Raw that's not really going to move the needle. Call me a cynic. It's kind of where I see it going. But those are my thoughts there. And then out of sheer curiosity, one might say sadistic pleasure, when I saw the Queen of the Ring finals and a graphic flashed up for Nia Jax versus Lyra Valkyrie, I couldn't resist. I was like, okay, now I have to watch. I need to see just how fucking rotten this turns out to be. Having no knowledge of who the hell Lyra Valkyrie is, to while at the same time knowing how horrible Nia Jax is. This had like train wreck levels of awful written all over it. And they hooked me. Unfortunately, it was not as horrible as I was expecting it to be. It wasn't any good, but it wasn't comically terrible either. I mean, again, you have to bear this in mind. I haven't watched SmackDown in like a month. I have no idea what's been going on throughout this King and Queen of the Ring tournament. When they show the highlights clip, I sort of browsed through it, not really paying all that close attention because I honestly didn't care all that much. To think that of all ways to go, they decided that Nia Jax versus Lyra Valkyrie was a good finals round. I'm partially glad I've been missing out. It was just kind of your run-of-the-mill big gal, little gal match. Lyra tried to play the cat and mouse game. She tried to avoid Nia at all costs, but ended up either getting smushed or thrown around like a rag doll. Again, having never seen any of Lyra's matches, because I don't watch NXT, she wasn't horrible here. At the same time, did she impress me to the point where I thought she's going to be WWE's next breakout female star? No, not really. She had good selling facials. Her timing was a little off in certain areas. She also has that modern-day training dilemma where she's taught that high-risk moves and crowd-pleasing spots are the best way to go. And to be fair, that's not even really a her problem. It's a problem with the trainers. I mean, again, it's one showing. Maybe I shouldn't be too quick to roll her out. Obviously, there's a reason they called her up to the main roster, because somebody sees potential in her. But I just wasn't blown away by her performance. The finish was fucking awesome, though. Nia just squashing Lyra like a bug in the corner with a bonsai drop. That legitimately popped me. I laughed so hard at that. I don't think it was supposed to be comedy, but it was really damn funny. And poor Lyra's trying to powerbomb Nia out of the corner. Nia just goes, "Fuck you, bitch. I'm going to just drop my fat ass on your chest and pin you." That's what she did. So the finish was great. Rest of the match was kind of mid. Again, though, another circumstance where WWE is calling up some girls from NXT, and I'm just not seeing it. I don't see it with Tiffany Stratton. I don't see it with Lyra Valkyrie. I didn't see it with, oh God, what were the other two's names? The girls that used to work the tag matches on SmackDown, they just kind of disappeared into the ether. Is it Alpha Fire and Ishmael Dawn? I don't believe those are their Christian names. Whatever happened to those two? Well, in any case, Nia is now the Queen of the Ring. Presumably, she'll be getting a title shot at SummerSlam. And since she's on SmackDown, I guess that would be against Bayley. I mean, those two, I think, actually had some history going back to NXT during the black and gold era. So we'll see. Maybe Bayley can pull off a miracle and get something watchable out of the walking sandbag known as Nia Jax. Not giving my hopes up. So from the Queen crown, we shift gears momentarily to talk about the men's crown. King of the Ring finals, Gunther versus Randy Orton. I believe Randy's entrance lasted longer than every match on the show put together. Good God almighty, that was never ending. How many fucking cycles did we go through with Orton's music? I lost count after 25. I think I now hate that song as much as I hate Rollins' music. So again, going back to my comments about the Queen of the Ring, the highlight package they put together to show all the prelim rounds here, I mean, I was only half paying attention because I really didn't have much of an opinion one way or the other on who was going to win this tournament. I like the idea of having Gunther and Orton in the finals because that was way more intriguing on paper than, say, Orton versus Jey Uso. I heard a lot of people were betting on Jey winning the whole thing, which would have been a horrible fucking call. So I'm glad they went with Gunther and Orton instead. And like in the back of my head, I kind of figured this was Gunther's tournament to win. The whole King Gunther gimmick kind of rolls off the tongue more so than it does King Randy. And Randy would have just looked goofy in a crown. And this wound up being the highlight of the show for me easily. This is a damn good match. And I think this is the first time these guys have faced off, correct? I don't ever remember seeing Orton and Gunther square off before. I mean, after this match, I'd be down to see it again in the future. You know, like the whole thing was built around the various bodily injuries that Orton was favoring. He had his one knee taped up pretty heavily. He's been favoring his back in previous matches, so they kind of worked those angles throughout the match. Like, the great thing about Gunther is that he's so good at working body parts and going after vulnerabilities in his opponents. It was the perfect match structure. And like every time Orton would capitalize or try to get some offense going, you know, Gunther would be there to stop his momentum, or Randy just wouldn't be able to take advantage of big spots because of the injuries. And I love this finish they came up with. It was really innovative. You have Orton hitting the RKO on Gunther, but because his leg was so beaten up, he couldn't put any weight on it when he crawled over to get the cover. So his leg is basically up in the air, right in plain view for Gunther to punch it and break up the pinfall. And so when Gunther goes after the leg, he immediately grapevines his shoulder and then schoolboys him over into a pinning predicament. And I don't know if this was exactly their plan here, but it added to the controversy of the way the match ended, because Orton clearly had one of his shoulders lifted off the mat before the ref counted the 3. So Gunther basically wins on a technicality, but they didn't argue it. They didn't try to restart the match. I think Corey brought it up in passing when they showed the footage again, but then they quickly glossed over and moved on. And like they do the big crowning deal afterwards where, Gunther tells the fans to go pound sand, saying he doesn't need their validation because Gunther knows what his next step is. He's going to SummerSlam and he's challenging for Damian Priest's world title. So that rolls out Cody, unfortunately. But that makes sense because Gunther's on Raw now, so there's really no reason to do a Cody-Gunther title match in the immediate future. And, well, we'll have to see, too, because, Priest is going to be challenging Drew McIntyre in Glasgow. He apparently got cleared from his injury. So we'll see if they decide to put the strap on Drew before SummerSlam. That's already going to be a weird match anyway, because I'm pretty sure both Drew and Damian are heels. Like, Damian's been teasing the face turn for a while, but I don't think they've fully broken up the Judgment Day yet. And at the same time, Drew's been feuding with Punk. He's been a fabulous douchebag prick on Raw. It's like one of the hottest WWE programs right now is Drew versus Punk. And both guys are injured. But it's all based on the promo material they've been doing. So I really don't know. Gunther and Drew would be interesting for the title, but if it's going to be a heel versus heel situation, the psychology could be out of whack with that. Obviously, Punk and Drew is the end game with everything. I mean, they definitely got some stuff to play with. And I like that they have options. I like all the talent that's involved with the world title picture at the moment. They just kind of need to fine-tune some of the details of who's going to be working the face-heel dynamic. But again, just to recap, excellent match with Gunther and Randy. Highly enjoyed this. And I like that they're finally elevating Gunther above the IC title status. They're doing all the right things with him. Now it's a question of how long before they fuck it all up. And that brought us to the main event. What I had initially thought was a title-for-title match for both the US and WWE Championship apparently is just for the WWE title. It's Logan Paul versus Cody Rhodes. Again, haven't been paying all that close attention to the build on SmackDown. I don't know if they had a change of heart, if we were just being steered in the wrong direction, thinking it was going to be a title-for-title match. Whatever the case is, I'm glad they just went with the WWE title instead. And if I'm being fair, and I'm trying to view this match in a vacuum, I very much had a love-hate relationship watching this unfold. There were parts that I liked, parts I didn't like, and it was really all over the map in terms of consistency. When they were chain wrestling early on and kept everything mostly basic, it was fine. When they worked the story of Cody's rib injury, it was fine. And like the angle later on when Logan Paul grabbed the brass knucks from his lackey on the floor, hit Cody Rhodes in the gut with them after he'd been favoring the ribs, I was okay with all that. The problem is that it very quickly devolved into the modern wrestling formula, where they start to rely way too much on the move pop spots and the kickouts and the near falls. And I actually plan on venting about this a little more when we do the takeover recap, so I won't get too specific here. I still think Cody relies way too much on the cute stuff. I can appreciate trying to evolve your moveset and do some creative things, but so much of his offense looks really sloppy. He's still doing that Cody cutter, which never looks any good. I've been on his case about that for years. The springboard arm drag spot, I've seen him do that a time or two, and he always fucks it up. Here's the thing with Cody, and it's frustrating because I like the guy. I really do. But let's call a spade a spade. Cody is not a particularly great athlete. He doesn't really work the modern style well enough to where he should be going to the well with the aerial stunts that often. You know, he's much better when he sticks to the basics because he can pull that stuff off. But I just see him try to do way too many things that just get in the way of what makes Cody great. He's a great promo. He's a great worker. He just tries to do too much. You know? You watch enough Cody matches over the years and there are certain things that stick out. And this is just one of his drawbacks as a talent. You know, Logan Paul's a fucking natural. That guy does everything well. Up to and including the flashy stuff. Every single time I see him, he's in much better ring shape. Like I said, there were pockets of good moments here. From bell to bell, though, it wasn't fluid. And by far, the most ridiculous part of the whole match, and in fact, it was so absurd I couldn't help but openly laugh about it. After literally seeing Logan and Cody on the floor for seemingly an hour, they're doing all these spots with the announce tables, like teasing putting the other guy through it. Logan getting into shouting matches with Michael Cole. The Cody Cutter spot on the announce table, which did not break, by the way. Like they'd occasionally slide back into the ring to stop the ref's count. It's the slowest 10 count in the history of mankind. At some point during this, I just screamed at the top of my lungs, why even bother with the fucking countouts? Just stop. Don't even bother. It's done. You've killed the 10 count. And no sooner should I say that, Logan does the big dive off the corner post to Cody through the announce table. All you hear from the official is, God is my fucking witness, I'm not kidding. After literally seeing these guys fight on the floor for an eternity, you hear the ref go, 1, 2, 3. And that was the point where I just threw my hands up and said, fuck you, I'm done, I don't care. That 5-minute sequence where it was nothing but floor brawling, that's when this match jumped the shark. It went from relatively strong main event world title match to indie level ridiculous, where it just buried the ref and made the whole thing look stupid. Like, in all seriousness, if they were going to spend that long outside the ring, just make it a fucking no DQ match and spare us the trouble. Is it that hard? And of course, you get the deal at the end where they bump the ref in the corner. Cody hits the vertebreaker on Logan for a visual pin, but the ref's still dead. So Logan groin shots Cody and goes for the brass knucks again. And even the finish, dude. It's another case of where they just get way too cute for their own good. They have the special guest Saudi ring announcer try to stop Logan from using the gimmick. And of course, it's dumb because who the hell is this guy? Have we ever seen him before prior to this show? Was he ever a crucial part to the story? Not from what I can tell. He was just a bystander who saw Logan trying to cheat. And he said, I must stop this asshole. Because nobody else is. And so Cody takes advantage, hits Logan with 3 crossroads, and gets the pin. All because Logan got distracted by a 125-pound ring announcer grabbing at his ankle. So I did not like the finish. Cody had to retain, yeah. But That was your grand idea? Couldn't have come up with something a little more innovative than that? I don't know. I mean, some people are going to bark about the fact that Logan's doing a job when he's already a current champ. Albeit I'm not too pleased about that myself. I'm just trying to figure out how this whole match came about. Did they ever explain on TV how Logan became the next challenger for Cody? What did Logan say or do prior to this that put him in line ahead of all the other top heels? Like, he was feuding with Kevin Owens. Then they threw Randy into the mix for WrestleMania. I don't even think he was part of the Backlash card, period, from what I remember. All of a sudden, now he's challenging Cody for the WWE title like a month later. Some ain't adding up in that timeline. Did he win a battle royal? Did he win some kind of qualifier? I mean, if he did, it had to have happened in the 3 weeks that we haven't been reviewing SmackDown. Again, I wasn't really sold on this being the next title program for Cody. It seemed a little hastily thrown together for my liking. Maybe something that ought to have been explored several months from now after we saw angles of Logan calling out Cody on social media, or him getting under his skin on TV to the point where Cody finally just wanted to shut the guy up. At least that would have made sense. But like 1 week he was like, okay, Cody beat AJ, and then the following week, oh hey, Logan Paul, he's your next opponent. Logic be damned. But Cody wins. I presume it puts this feud to closure. SummerSlam, I have to imagine the end game is Cody and Randy. That's what apparently has been rumored as the title match. I know plans change, but I guess for the next couple months, they'll keep him preoccupied with the next challenger of the month. But those are my thoughts on the Kane/Queen of the Ring. I like the Gunther Orton match. Bits and pieces of the Logan Cody main event. The other two matches didn't really do a whole lot for me. And we'll just pretend that Becky Liv match didn't happen, because ain't nobody got time to watch Liv bore the brakes off everybody at home. I wasn't bored. I guess that's a good thing. But it's just kind of another WWE Premium Live special in the book. Not a great show, not a bad show. If you're looking for a way to kill a few hours on Saturday, you might enjoy it as a casual sit-through. Was it exciting? Not really. It's kind of what modern wrestling pay-per-views are these days. I'm just glad I don't have to watch them at 8 o'clock at night when I'm already tired and cranky. So when I looked at the Raw feature for this week, and I saw that the main event was a Jeff Jarrett versus Undertaker King of the Ring qualifier, it hit me right there. Where the fuck has The Undertaker been for the last month and a half? I completely forgot about him. My all-time favorite wrestler. Never even registered. You know, The Undertaker's been MIA since WrestleMania. Wonder where he's been at. Remember the whole story where Kama stole Taker's urn? Tried to melt it down into a golden necklace? Apparently that feud is still ongoing. Taker is still on the hunt to regain possession of his stolen property. About 90 days later. Seriously, that is how bad these Raws are. They're so egregiously awful. Even when my favorite wrestler of all time is nowhere to be seen for weeks on end. I don't even process it. And it's not to say Taker's run in the last year has been a banner success. He's actually been involved with some of the weaker, crappier material. And again, that comes from a diehard Taker fan. I make no excuses. And in completely unrelated news, Diesel is recovering from reconstructive elbow surgery, which I also forgot was a thing that happened back in 1995. Apparently, the jackknife powerbomb spotted in your house resulted in him landing on his elbow when he got dropped by Sid. I do remember that part of the match. I remember the landing looked a bit awkward. I just didn't recall Diesel actually smacking his elbow off the mat like that. Sure enough, he did. Enough to where it put Diesel on the shelf for a bit. Of course, not long enough to where they needed to strip him of the world title. If this were WWE 15 years later, that would have been the opening segment on Raw. Diesel would have walked out there with his arm in a sling, doing the sympathetic babyface promo about how he needs to relinquish the belt because he cannot fulfill his championship obligations. Now, this was back when the boys were tough. So he patched it up, sat at home for a few weeks, and before you knew it, he was back to tear the house down. Actually, it was more like him coming back to perform like Kevin Nash always did. Slow and boring. But we all wish him a speedy recovery. Everyone except Sid Vicious. He went out this week and killed Mike Curry in about a minute. In addition to giving him the jackknife, he also made sure to give him a nice pat on the ass for good measure. Okay, no joke. That is now the second wrestling match I've seen in under a week where guys were blatantly ass-groping each other in front of the camera. You wonder why people already look sideways at wrestling fans. Well, this shit validates that criticism. And then following all that, they had James Andrews, the orthopedic surgeon, kind of do a rundown of the diagnosis of Nash's elbow injury. And the powerbomb incident was the spot that actually ruptured the tendon and then caused the bone spur. But he was already banged up from a few other bumps he took earlier in the match where he got dropped on his elbow. I think he took a choke slam from Sid at one point and came down really hard. So the lesson learned, everybody. Do not try to break your fall by landing on your elbow. Bad idea. Or better yet, just don't be 7 feet tall. It'll be easier to take bumps on your back. Up next, we had Adam Bomb versus Bob Cook. Other than Jerry Lawler royally fucking up the sponsor plugs and Vince getting visibly pissed at him, I wrote nothing down. Adam Bomb won was something. Nobody gave a shit. I was actually mildly disappointed they glossed right over the Sega Genesis plug. Not because I'm a video game advocate, but I once saw a great meme on the internet by a famous streamer that had me in stitches. I believe it was something to the effect of, Genesis, Genesis, what and then Genesis? If you know, you know. By the way, if you notice a pattern of me intentionally glossing over these TV squashes this week, it's because I'm intentionally glossing over the squash matches this week. Hakushi versus John Snikowski. Need I say anything else? Actually, I will. Only because I wrote it down. Why the fuck was John Snikowski wrestling in a cheap Halloween superhero costume? Well, the answer is because this show sucks. And every single job guy looks like they're straight out of the indie circuit. The NWA job guys on the TBS shows did not look this wretched. And most of them wrestled without shirts on. Think about that. But then we come to the real low point of this week's program. If you can believe that. We've already seen 3 straight squashes where my notes consist of nothing but BS satire. And yet they were all significantly better than this interview segment with Vince McMahon and Alundra Blaze. Stop me if you've heard this before. Alundra Blaze. Far from what you would consider a reasonably good promo. I would even go as far as to say she was downright atrocious when it came to putting a microphone in front of her face. You can tell Vince was deliberately trying to keep this as short as possible. And it still blew chunks. He's trying to tie up loose ends from the Bertha Faye angle a month or so back, when she debuted on Raw and laid out Blaze, subsequently breaking her nose by throwing her face first into the turnbuckle, which legitimately happened, by the way. That's why we haven't seen Alundra Blaze on this show since then. So in only the way that Alundra could ever deliver a promo, she forcibly tried to wield herself through this. Not a single word sounded unrehearsed. It sounded like she was visibly reading off a teleprompter with the way she glared into the camera. Like someone had a gun pointed to her back. And she basically said something to the effect of, "I don't even know who Bertha Faye is, but I'm ready for her. I'm back on Raw. I'm here to stay. Yay. Please cheer for me." I think I still showed too much emotion there. Oh, by the way, she actually had to rally up the fans to cheer for her when Vince brought up her regaining the women's title. I think most people forgot. They were just kind of sitting on their hands. You could see Blaze lifting her hands up in the air and going, "That's your cue, assholes! Cheer for me!" Yeah, this sucked. God bless her. I know a lot of older school fans have a sweet spot for Alundra Blaze, Medusa, whatever you want to call her. She wasn't very good. Nor was she very good looking. But that's a story for a different day. And then Men on a Mission had a squash that went about 5 minutes too long. I don't even know if I caught the names of the guys they wrestled. Gary Scott and Andy Ferguson, I think. The only thing comically bad about this was seeing Mo actually sell for Gary Scott. That was the moment you realized Vince totally turned the page on Mom. He was so done with Mo. And at the same time, completely sold on Mabel. And Mabel's in there smashing dudes and killing guys left and right. Mo was selling for fucking Gary Scott. Give me a break. Mabel got the win with a pancake splash. And then we had our TV main event. Double J versus The Undertaker. King of the Ring qualifier. Also a lame excuse for them to plug their newest t-shirt design. A glow-in-the-dark Taker shirt that read, "He's got soul." Only available in large, extra large, and dangerously corpulent. So for anybody under the 200-pound mark, you are shit out of luck trying to find a shirt in your size. So I'll go ahead and spare you the goosebumps conversation over Taker's entrance. Still the best ring entrance of all time. Fuck you if you disagree. And of course, The moment Taker makes his return to television, I immediately realize what the show's been greatly missing for the last month and a half. Some goddamn Undertaker matches. Everything I love about Taker's matches, man. This had it all. Up to and including the great overselling from all the heels. Road Dogg in particular was so phenomenal here. My favorite spot in this match, and I have to mention it now, otherwise I'm going to forget. The spot where Double J clotheslines Taker over the top rope to the floor. It's a signature spot in most of his matches where he'll land on his feet. Sometimes there'll be a flunky or some underneath heel standing outside the floor right beside Taker when he goes out. The visual here when Taker snaps his head to the left looks directly at Road Dogg, and Road Dogg throws his hands up in the air and starts screaming and cowering in fear. Even before Taker goozled him. God, it was tremendous. And it wasn't a complete one-sided squash either. Jarrett actually got a good bit of offense here on Taker, which, it wasn't the most exciting stuff to watch. Taker's selling was never really a great feature of his matches. But we had all the usual spots you'd expect. Zombie sit-up, no-sell comeback, diving clothesline off the ropes, choke slams, tombstones, the whole 9 yards. We also had Paul Bear giving chase to Road Dogg at ringside, which is a delightful sight. It wasn't too often you saw Paul Bear try to run. I would more so call it a waddle, but nevertheless, hysterical visual. Again, it was very formulaic stuff. Taker controlled the offense early on. Jarrett eventually cut him off on the floor and worked over his knee for a while. Then Taker made the big comeback after the sit-up spot, pair of choke slams, tombstone pile driver for the 3 count. And just like that, The Undertaker is now a King of the Ring qualifier, which may have been the only time in history that I ever remember Taker taking part in the King of the Ring tournament. I definitely don't remember him being heavily involved in this tournament at any other point in his career. Although that would have been a hell of a rib at some point. King Undertaker. Could you imagine? Instead of fucking Billy Gunn in 1998 or 99, whatever year it was, they should have had King Undertaker during the Ministry of Darkness days. That would have been so much fun. So yeah, all in all, fun main event. Not a Jeff Jarrett fan. I never proclaimed to be. But he was always a good worker. He knew his way around a ring. Again, I don't think he's around that much longer before he leaves for WCW by the end of the year, right? Or am I thinking 96? I think I might have my dates screwed up here. Oh, it had to have been 96 because Nitro wasn't even on the air by this point. And I don't think Jarrett was around for any of the Nitros in late 95. Maybe he left the WWF in 95, but sat out the remainder of his contract. I know a lot of guys that did that. Hogan and Savage being the 2 notable big names. In any case, main event here was good. Everything else on the show sucked donkey tits. Look, we've now reached the point with these retro Raws where, God, even the squash material isn't worth harping on. Most of it's just plain filler most of the time. The fuck were they doing with Adam Bomb in 1995? Not a damn thing. So why he needed a squash match this week beats me. Like, the same goes with Akushi. Complete waste of TV time. You know, at least Mabel was about to win the King of the Ring in less than a month, so I can justify him getting a TV win. But God, man, you want to talk about the ultimate struggle for star power. This is the WWF in the mid-90s. All those top names of generations gone by, they were all on WCW. And meanwhile, they had Kevin Nash. Maybe throw in Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels as well. And God bless Bret. But he definitely wasn't a Hogan or a Savage in terms of recognizable name power. You know, they've already fucked over Luger. Yoko had one foot out the door. And we all know the problems that came when they tried to push Diesel and Shawn as the top guys over the next year and a half. Ratings bomb, brother. That's what they should have renamed Nash's finish. Instead of the jackknife power bomb, they should have called it the ratings power bomb. So that brings us to NXT Takeover. The official one. Not NXT Arrival, which apparently never counted as the first Takeover Special. This is where the actual journey began. The series of live specials that put NXT on the map as the must-see attraction. And it all dates back to May 29th, 2014, here at the Full Sail Arena. And, well, nothing screams takeover like sending out the clown posse to open up the show with hokey dancing and prancing. With poor old Becky Lynch at the forefront of the conga line. I'll get to that in just a sec. You know, one thing I haven't really done well with a lot of my pay-per-view recaps is just giving a general thoughts breakdown of the whole event. Like, I spent a lot of time doing things segment by segment. But in terms of the show overall, you know, I've been a little inconsistent with that. I think it's important here because, you know, one thing I always hear the hardcores talk about is how great all these takeover specials used to be. You'll often hear fans say, oh, there was never a bad takeover. Yeah, NXT always delivered on the big events, blah, blah. And like, I know hindsight is 2020. It's easy enough for me to sit here and openly mock everybody for having such stupid opinions. I will say this. I didn't love everything on this card. But if I'm trying to be objective, I do understand why these takeover events get resounding positive reviews. You know, it's kind of like what we talk about with today's WWE product, where, you know, especially when the company goes international, the live crowds always give these shows more energy. They're into everything. They're actively involved throughout the show. And it does help to make things seem a little more substantial, you know? When the crowds are dead and quiet, and they're sitting on their hands the whole time, it kind of drains your energy as a fan watching at home. Because you're feeding off that lackadaisical response. You know, and even though this one was pre-big venue NXT, before they started running Orlando and Toronto and Philly, all those big areas, the Full Sail crowd had great energy throughout the show. As much as I despise everything about the Exotic Express, when you see the fans dancing along with the peanut gallery, it at least can kind of give you the acknowledgement that they're into the gimmick. I don't know why. But the point remains. And I fucking knew it. I called it. When they booked that Adam Rose Camacho match the other week with the count-out finish, what did I say? I said they're going to curtain jerk the takeover card with the exact same match. Called it in my sleep. Sure enough, here comes Adam Rose and the party crew, dancing their way through the hallways of the Full Sail Arena, with everybody singing along to that ridiculous theme song. I know I love to rag on Seth Rollins' theme music, but It was just painful enough for me to contemplate wanting to pull up his music again. I think this is actually where a lot of that sing-along crap started. You can all blame Adam Rose for that. This, it is kind of amazing to think about, right? The takeover specials that are so critically acclaimed, the very first one, going all the way back to May of 2014, the opener is Adam Rose versus Camacho. They came a long way. That's all I can say about it. So here's basically everything I jotted down about this match. Camacho was a very gifted athlete with a great look that never stood a chance under Vince's regime. Adam Rose's gimmick was death TV on every level. They did a lot of hokey comedy spots early on, many of which looked sus and very questionable. Adam Rose sold for a little bit, made a decent fiery comeback, hit a really nice double-A spine buster, and then he spiked Camacho with a party foul and won. Whole thing went, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. Probably didn't need to exceed that. As an opener, it served its purpose. It's not anything you were going to remember 5 months after it happened. But it was a fine prelim match. Again, just not my flavor of gimmick choice. And if that makes me a party pooper, y'all can lick my hairy butthole. And then following that, they had a nice little video package they put together for Sami Zayn, kind of hyping up the number one contenders match with him and Tyler Breeze for later on. Sort of going over the rise and fall throughout his NXT career thus far. You know, he's trying to make this moment count because it brings him one step closer to NXT Gold. And that's what Sami's been after for the last 12 months. And from there, they pretty much went directly into the NXT Tag Title match. It's the Ascension defending against the only real babyface challenge they've had on TV in the last month, El Cal and Kalisto. And they've been such great babyfaces, the crowd has been reacting to them by chanting, "Yah," which is what got the Ascension over. And yes, they are still heels for the record. You know, much like the opener, I really didn't have much to say about it. It was quite one-dimensional in terms of layout. They had a fiery hot start with all four guys until the heels cut off Kalisto and then killed him for about an hour. Then El Cal made a really sloppy comeback where he fucked up like 2/3 of the spots he tried. And then Victor and Connor cut him off at the end and then pinned him with a fall of man. It was a complete Road Warrior smash over. The problem was they still expected the Mexicans to be the babyfaces here, which they plainly were not. Because, well, I don't know if this is a newsflash bulletin to all of you out there, but when the fans see big dudes killing smaller dudes in dominant-like fashion, it tends to get them more over as a result. It may seem like reverse psychology, but it's universally true. Wrestling fans really like seeing big, scary men beat up little people. So now we're pretty much back at square one with the Ascension. They continue to wreck shop in NXT as the champions, despite having virtually no competition to work with. The entire division consists of these men, and then whatever makeshift babyface pairing they come up with for the month. So we'll see. I honestly have no memory of how they eventually got the belts off these guys. I don't know if they dropped them to somebody else, if they just relinquish the belts before being called up to the main roster. Well, in any case, we'll see what the next chapter is. As for El Local, I think his next chapter is a trip to the unemployment line. If you can't get through a 2-minute sequence without blowing 99% of your spots, time to call it quits, pal. There's a Walmart greeter position open somewhere in the country. So then we had the Sami Zayn-Tyler Breeze match. I believe this is where they debuted Breeze's infamously popular theme music. The one that wasn't just the generic placeholder music. I think this is the one they made the video promo for and everything. And he did the lyrical backgrounds. I also noted the sign in the front row that read, "Breeze is my dad." There are some things in this world that probably should not be aired in public. I can only pray to God that guy was lying. So again, the story behind this, they did a 3-way on TV with these two plus Tyson Kidd, and Tyson obviously won the match. But since Zayn and Breeze were already jaw-jacking back and forth and taking jabs at each other, Zayn issued the challenge to Breeze here to shut him up. And, this is fine. Kind of goes back to what I said about Adam Rose in the opener. If you've been following my NXT recaps, you know I'm not the biggest Tyler Breeze fan. I never was. The gimmick was a little too on the nose for me personally. But I will give credit where it's due. This was the first match I've seen out of him since I started doing these NXT reviews where I could actually buy the idea that he was more than just a gimmick. Like, he actually worked like an upper mid-card / main event talent here. And here's the thing. If I had one gripe about this match, I thought it got a little over-excessive with the near falls and the kickouts. Like, kind of to the point where suspension of disbelief went out the window. Like, they were working the story at one point where Zayn took a nasty spill out to the floor and started selling the back of his head. And I like that part, because it kind of played into the story they've been telling with Sami, where he's been dealing with these series of concussion problems. Like, kayfabe or not, it doesn't really matter. But then as the match goes, it just kind of turns into one of those modern near-fall spam deals where they're kicking out of so much stuff. And the crowd enjoyed it because they got the pop for all the kickouts. I don't know. I thought it was a little much, especially after almost 20 minutes. With that said, they both worked hard. Like I noted with Breeze, this is probably the first time that I actually saw him go out there and be more than just a terrible Shawn Michaels parody. Sami's always great as the underdog babyface in peril. He's a natural at selling. The crowd was a little more 50-50 in terms of who they were in favor of. I think it was skewed a little more towards Sami, but it wasn't cut and dry. And the whole idea is to get you to buy the idea that Sami was going to break out of his so-called slump to finally move one step closer to title contention. And then right at the point where he had Breeze in trouble, he gives him the big dive out to the floor, rolls him back in to set up the haluva kick in the corner. And they actually do come up with a really clever finish here where Breeze goes to cover up with his fists, but because Zayn had his leg lifted up to try to boot Breeze, he accidentally gets cock-blocked by Breeze's fists. So he goes down selling the gonads. The referee's asking Breeze if the shot was intentional or not. And then Breeze hits Zayn with a spin heel kick and pins him. So now the debate is over whether or not Breeze intentionally cheated or not. Sami gets screwed. again. It's the only time in history where a losing streak actually got somebody over. One guy in the history of pro wrestling ever pulled that off, and his name was Sami Zayn. A one of a kind. And Al Breeze is the number one contender, which kind of spoiled the main event in more ways than one, but we'll get into that later on. Again, I thought it was fine. Maybe even considerably good if we want to go a step further. Would I call it great? No. Would I call it a match of the year? No. 2014, maybe that was the case for a lot of fans. God knows they were seeing anything like this on the main roster at the time. As a modern-style pro wrestling match, it was good. It had drama. It had ebb and flow. It made sense. People stayed with it. So it worked for the room, no doubt. For my personal taste, I probably could have gone without the copious amounts of kickouts and near falls. If anything, because I know this kind of set a bad precedent for how future younger talent would view wrestling and the way they perceived how to work effective matches. Kind of got them into a bad mindset. And it's still a recurring problem in today's product where there's too much of an over-reliance on the near falls and the kickouts to try to sell the art of a wrestling match. And a lot of the time it gets way too ridiculous. Especially once you exceed the 15-minute mark. Am I too harsh? Perhaps. It was definitely a quality match. And I appreciated the fact that they at least bothered to sell shit. Put over the effect of taking moves. They didn't just leap back up to their feet 15 seconds after dive spots. I just could have done without the 87 near falls. So then, it was time to break up the monotony of this takeover card with some good old-fashioned pro-America publicity. Out come Lana and Rusev, spreading the good word of Russia, going so far as to flash up an image of Vladimir Putin on the Jumbotron, just to rub salt in the wound. That was kind of funny. And while Lana's out there putting over Russia as the next worldwide superpower, by the way, it just hit me here. You listened to Lana cut promos back in the day, and now that we know her accent was faker than a $3 bill, it was really, really bad. You could even hear the inconsistencies back then, right before they had her drop the gimmick entirely. So anyway, blah, blah, Russia bad, evil empire, boo the bad guys. Then they decide to send out one of the locker room babyfaces with the American flag to do the pro-America speech. And of all fucking people to send out, they throw Mojo Rawley out there. Mojo Rawley. The epitome of fuck you, go away, get off my goddamn TV heat. And so, folks, wouldn't you know it, poor Mojo goes out there, immediately gets demolished and laid out by Rusev. Not once, but twice. Once in the ring, and then again on the rampway. So he was doubly the American geek. And, well, the message they apparently were trying to spread here was America sucks, Russia is superior, and Lana was correct all along. somehow I failed to see what any of this accomplished. Call me crazy. But I'm not really connecting the dots here. Does Mojo get his revenge on Rusev? Does he wrestle him on the main roster at some point in 2014 to save America from the evil foreign adversary? My guess would be no. I think they literally just did this to kill airtime. Because I have no fucking clue what any of the purpose of it was. They legitimately brought Rusev back to NXT here to literally just kill a babyface mid-carder and then leave. Wonderful. Great use of TV time, guys. Then we come to the finals of the NXT Women's Title Tournament. And I will use the proper term this time. I won't call it the Divas Belt. The road to getting to this point was long and painful. A lot of sucky prelim matches in between. But they boiled it down to Natty versus Charlotte Flair. And of course, this is about to be a big crowning achievement for Charlotte's career. So they made sure to have Ric Flair at ringside. It was also cool having Little Nate as the official here. Charles Robinson. That was a nice touch. I mean, they all but spoiled what the end result was going to be as soon as Rick came out. Not that the finish was ever really in doubt. Of course, Charlotte was going to end up winning this thing. And, to be fair, this was also back during a time when they hadn't already rammed this chick up my sphincter hole for nearly a decade. So she was a little more tolerable back then. A little easier on the eyes. Nowadays, she's both visually insufferable and hideous to look at. But with all those fucking Botox injections she's got going on. Okay, seriously, side rant here. I know there's not a lot of ladies watching this podcast, but this is a genuine question. Ladies, why do you think that shit is attractive? The big lips, the swollen face. Am I just missing something? In what world does any rational man look at that and say, that's hot? I'm waiting. I talk to a lot of dudes. Ain't nobody beating off to Botox. Oh, by the way, we're going to ignore all the current Ric Flair restaurant drama. I know that is very timely at the moment. I did have fun listening to Courtney and Brian last vent about that on their last podcast. Hilarious. Yes. But not something that I want to cover here for the sake of time. It's sad to see where Flair's at mentally these days. As a longtime Ric Flair fan, it just kind of irritates it to even think about some of this stuff. Gives his name a bad reputation for all the younger fans growing up watching today. When they see and read things about that. God. But again, this was kind of neat with what they did. You had two girls representing two respective family trees in wrestling history. Rick is in Charlotte's corner. Bret Hart is out there in Natalia's corner. I believe there's one documented match in WWF going back to 1992 when Flair and Hart were under the same roof for a brief window. And unfortunately, it's not really a match that people remember too well. I don't even think it's a pay-per-view match. Pretty sure it was just a taped TV match. And that kind of sucks, The fact that we never really had a full-fledged Bret Hart-Ric Flair feud in wrestling makes you wonder what could have been if things worked out. People often like to talk about dream matches. Now, what about dream feuds and missed opportunities? Flair versus Hart. That one doesn't get enough attention, unfortunately. I'm not trying to make this conversation all about the legends, because I've got to give the ladies credit where it's due. This is a very, very good match. And I need to be specific here, too, because I know some people will hear that and think I'm going to put a caveat on that statement. Like, it was a good girls' match. No. This was a very good match, period. In terms of the way they laid it out, the story they told throughout the match, basically doing everything they could to sell you on the idea that these two were evenly matched, that they were the best female athletes in the entire company fighting for the top belt in the division. They succeeded in doing so. There was a struggle. There was a tale of equal skill level they implemented here to kind of draw you in on the idea that they were at an even playing field. And again, this is all coming from a very heavy Charlotte critic. You all know I cannot stand that blonde bimbo. The way WWE has tried to ram and force her down my throat for the last 10 plus goddamn years, saying she's an all-timer. I don't think she's as good as the company perceives her to be. But every so often, there's a gem hidden in there where you see flashes of good moments from her. And with the right opponent, Charlotte has had good performances. The problem, though, is that people way too often misinterpret Charlotte Flair matches as being better than they really are. But Natty was the perfect dance partner for her. They worked the submission hold spots. They reached into the bag of tricks from their old men and tried to use some of their signature spots. They did a lot of counter-for-counter exchanges. And we get that big climax toward the end where Charlotte's got Natty wrapped in the figure four. They both roll out to the floor so that Charlotte can shove Natty into the ring steps. Then she bangs up her knee right as Charlotte tosses her back in. A couple more brief moments where Natty tries to make a comeback, but Charlotte turns around and hits her with a rolling DDT spot. It's a terrible finish. Had a terrible name, too. I won't even utter it here, else I might openly vomit on command. But Charlotte gets the big win. Ric Flair immediately takes off the jacket and starts waving it around like it's a terrible towel. That had me rolling. And you get that moment where he and Charlotte embrace together. It's a nice little cathartic family moment. Natalya being way too quick to hug Charlotte afterwards. I wasn't all too fond about that. I mean, I can respect the friendly competition aspect, but, she did just get her leg destroyed not 5 minutes prior. Maybe you ought to sell the frustration before you immediately break character and just hug her like she's your best friend. That's all I'm saying. All in all, I think this is the match that people often look back at and say, this one stole the takeover card. And I might have to agree with that. Not to play spoiler for the main event, because that was good too. But I think just in terms of raw, pure emotion, this had a little more going into it than the main event match did. And again, I do not like the pro-WWE Charlotte propaganda. It irritates me to no end. But I will put her over when she's earned it. She had a great showing here. And Natty was great too. I think I would put this one up there with the Bayley-Sasha Iron Man match in terms of all-time classic NXT women's matches. Does it shift my opinion on Charlotte any? No. I still think she's overrated. But it doesn't mean that I think she's entirely useless as a talent. I just think WWE's relied on her way too much in the previous 10 years without getting a whole lot of return on that investment in the long haul. But that's a now problem as opposed to a then problem. I mean, we'll see how things change when she comes back from her ACL injury. Jury's still out on whether or not anything changes when she comes back to TV and gets booked. If they just go right back to having her overshadow the other girls, it just takes them back to the same problem we've been dealing with for years now. And the fans have only grown to get more and more sick of it. I'm telling you, man, listen to the crowd response to Charlotte in the last 10 years. The same people that were so into her during the NXT days, they're tired of her. They see what's going on. And the problem is they continually battle with this thing where they want to push her as a babyface on TV, but everybody resents it because she's much better suited as a heel. It's just swimming upstream a lot of the time. And for whatever reason, some people just don't see it. And I'm calling you out, Jim Cornette. Time to wake up and smell the coffee, dude. I understand you have the background and the lineage with Ric Flair, but let's not pretend that Charlotte is the next coming of Jesus Christ. She is and always will be overrated. And I stand by it. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox here. Let's talk about the main event. For the NXT title, Adrian Neville defends against Tyson Kidd. A babyface match with one of the biggest asterisks placed next to it. In every Tyson Kidd appearance we've seen since the moment he showed up in NXT, he's been getting progressively more and more prudish. Bit of an attitude change, so to speak. And I'm glad they really towed the line with him here, because it gave an element of drama to this match that it otherwise would not have had if they would have just done a straight babyface match. But at the same time, Tyson was able to act heelish at certain points without plainly reverting to direct cheating. Like, he would do heelish things like forearming Neville in the face when he wasn't expecting it, taking some underhanded shots. And you saw as the match kept going, he was getting more and more frustrated that he couldn't put Neville away. It started with them going pound for pound, all the basic chain stuff at first. And they did some flashy offense early on, but it was a lot of counter back and forth. And then you saw Kidd start throwing some stiffer shots and try to gain control of the match where he could. And while I wouldn't say there was really a heat portion to the match, Kidd definitely slowed the pace down and kept things a little more mad-based. Gave Neville a chance to fire up at the end and do more of his flashy, crowd-pleasing offense. And there was some cool stuff they broke out here. Again, both of these guys are hella athletes. I like the Russian leg sweep off the middle rope that Tyson gave to Adrian. That was sick. The suplex bump out to the floor. Again, I always cringe when I see guys doing that spot. Somehow, that move has never ended in catastrophe. I'll never know how. Of all ways for a guy to break his ankle or destroy his ACL, somehow that move, they've been able to make that perfectly safe. And it was kind of like what I said with the Bree Zayn match. It did draw a little heavy on the big move kick-out aspect of things. I would maybe argue it worked better in this environment than, say, something that was booked third on the card. But it didn't get out of hand. They mainly just kept the story centered around Tyson Kidd getting more fed up the longer the match went. And it kind of leads to the spot where he goes for broke, so to speak, as he goes up to try to do a big high-risk move. Neville cuts him off, gives him a really great-looking Hurricane Rana off the top, and that leaves Kidd in prone position for Neville to hit the red arrow for the 3 count. Clean win. Neville gets the big W on the title retention. And they give you that little post-match angle where Neville goes to try to do the sporty handshake, but Kid gives him the passive shoulder bump and then leaves the ring. He was also trying to sell the effects as well by limping. Someone probably should have given him a tutorial on how to properly limp. Kind of looked wonky. But that was the cliffhanger they left you on. Even though Kid didn't leave with the belt, the attention was more on him here. Because you see, they aren't done wrapping up whatever his beef is with Adrian Neville in the whole world title picture. So I liked it. Not as much as the previous match with the girls, but, as a main event, it worked. The Breeze, Zayn, Charlotte, Natty, and Neville Kid matches are definitely what I would go out of your way to watch. And they were the matches that kind of gave this takeover the big hype morale that a lot of fans reflect back with. I mean, it's definitely a 3-match card. The opener and the tag match were nothing burgers by and large. And we'll just ignore whatever in the hell that thing was with Mojo, Rawley, and Rusev. But yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage you to go back and check out those 3 matches I mentioned. In general, the first Takeover Special, as I look back, it was a very enjoyable, solid 2-hour special. I had fun with it. Is it something you need to watch from start to finish on a loop over and over again? Nah, probably not. But if you're trying to relive some history and see some of the names of generations gone by, you might get some nostalgia from it. I mean, I think the one thing that stands out here as I look back, and the only 2 names on this card that are still remotely active today, you have Sami Zayn and you have Charlotte. And Charlotte's injured right now. I think, maybe Natty's still around. Is she still working a full-time schedule? And I haven't seen her in God knows how long. Maybe she's hurt too. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, look at the card. Adam Rose is gone. The Ascension are distant memories at this point. Tyler Breeze has been out of the market for a few years now. Tyson Kidd's retired. Adrian Neville, Pac. He's been wasted potential in AEW for the last 4 years. No, Camacho just came back to WWE in the last month. But now he's going by Tongaloa, his Christian name. So yeah, I guess he still counts as an active WWE employee. After spending 10 years in Japan trying to wipe the stain of this god-awful run. But the point remains, it's been a rough road for a lot of these names. And it is a developmental system, so it's kind of an accepted fact that a lot of these names were going to seep through the cracks. Some of them just weren't going to be main roster material. But that's always the hard part when you go back and look at a lot of these old NXT shows, and you look at all these names that just never had any main roster success. The math is not good. Y'all remember, go back to this channel a few years ago. It was one of the first long-form podcast videos that I did, where I just broke down all those names, the former NXT names that were up on the main roster, and just going over their careers and talking about the ones that panned out versus the ones that didn't. And it's bad. And granted, that was under the Vince regime, but the point remains, some of them may have been pushed for a brief window, but how many of them became full-fledged main eventers? The ones that obviously stand out are Roman and Seth. But, I mean, they kind of date back to the FCW days more so than the black and gold era. I guess you would classify Sami Zayn as a main roster success. He's not on a Roman or a Seth level. But, yeah. Take out Sami and Charlotte. The numbers weren't good here. And you'll see as we go through the timeline, it follows a lot of those same patterns. But, kind of wrap up everything for this show. One of the longer Monday shows we've done in quite a while. That's fine. Had a lot of stuff to cover this weekend. As always, I want to thank everybody for coming back to check out the show. Again, make sure you subscribe and comment and like the podcast for me. And we'll be back on Friday for more of the classic wrestling coverage. As always, I have to try to keep posted with these weekend shows because it seems like there's WWE live events coming up every 2 or 3 weeks at this point. They already announced the one after the King of the Ring special, or the King and Queen of the Ring. So let's see, May 25th. That was over the weekend. So Battleground is going to be the next show. That is on June 9th. God, what is that, 2 weeks from now? Is that NXT or is that... Oh, that's NXT. Well, fuck that noise. We ain't going to talk about that. Clash at the Castle. That's the next big one. That's the following weekend. June 15th. Yeah. And that's the Glasgow, Scotland show. So that'll be another premium live event that'll take place in the afternoon. Because it's international, which is great. But yeah, a lot of these shows are just kind of back to back to back. Not a whole lot of breathing room, unfortunately. Well, we'll talk about that when we get to it. Thanks everybody for watching. Take care. Peace out.